There we go. So I have something to say that's like kind of like current events kind of material before we get to the review. Have you guys seen the price of RAM?
Yeah.
How many people are unaware of this? Okay, only a few people. So,
I had to buy RAM recently.
you poor soul.
$200 for 16 gigs.
$200, yeah, that's about what 16 gigs is going for now.
I've heard that SSDs are also going to go up because they use the same wafers as RAM, and I just got a new NVMe the other day, and I feel like I got the last chopper out of Saigon.
Yeah, yeah, like, okay, let me just, alright.
I'm pretty sure it's because OpenAI has like pre-ordered like 1/3 of the world's like manufactured RAM for the next year.
Yep, it's
Yeah.
another thing to blame AI for.
Check that out. That's 32, that's 32 gigs.
They gotta give me like
Duplicate, there we go.
I got 32 gigs last year for 60
If you
bucks.
think that's bad, now, I think these days it's not uncommon to find new laptops with 64 gigs in them. That's bloody half what the laptop costs now.
That old one, I literally just bought a laptop for that much.
Yeah,
With half that memory.
yeah, yeah, look at that. Look at that.
that's also basically
That's like a graphics card right there.
Yeah. So, okay, but, alright, this has just happened. Like, the computers that are currently on sale for, like, Black Friday and stuff, haven't, like, those are the runs through when, the hardware runs when RAM was cheap. So, if you need a new computer, do it now. Because if you wait for a year, these prices will be reflected in the price of the computer, and probably the prices of computers are going to jump by like $500 to $1,000 in a year. Yes?
What happens when the market crashes for AI and then everybody has a whole bunch of useless RAM?
Keep the computer.
Well, it's interesting, right? So here's the thing, right? The reason that this is a big problem is that the supply of like this type of computer chip is quite inelastic, right? You guys know what I mean when I say that? It's like an economics term. So basically, it takes a very long time to set a plant up to manufacture this stuff, right? Like, we're probably talking like 5 to 10 years to set a plant up to manufacture it. It can only make it so fast, so the amount of RAM that's in the market is, to some degree, fairly fixed, right? So there's really, like, there's no addressing this issue, right? It's not like, oh, we can just dial up RAM production and we'll just stop not coming in on weekends and then we'll have more RAM and everybody can have RAM. No, that's not how it works, right? The this is a problem. This is going to be the case for some time. The thing I heard about, the thing that's really driving this, although like it is like the initial sort of poke at this was OpenAI buying 1/3 of the RAM in existence. But the secondary follow-up that's really causing the prices is that hardware manufacturers are stockpiling these, and at these prices, because they're like, well, but wait, hold, OpenAI, you can't just buy all the RAM. We need RAM too. So they're like, well, if we're gonna like, because here's the thing, right? By buying 1/3 of the RAM in existence, OpenAI has introduced all kinds of instability in the market, because it's like, well, they bought 1/3 of the RAM this month. What if they go for the second third of the RAM next month? Right? What if they literally buy all the RAM?
funny thing is that's actually why Samsung stopped production because of that.
Yeah.
Because of the market instability. They said they're stopping production, drastically lowering production on their chips. It's like,
Yeah. yeah, like, one more reason to hate that bloody company. Anyway, that's a current topic, yeah, it might date the video, but just so you know, in the December of 2025, there was a RAM crisis caused by stupid AI. AI is probably a thing you've never heard of, future people.
So you want to still DDR3?
Yeah?
So you want to be able to still buy DDR3?
Yeah. Okay, so if you want RAM, just get old slow RAM. You buy that RAM that went in your Pentium PCs in 2002, that stuff you can still get. Like, if I was like TSC right now, I'd be like, what the heck, guys? Come on. That's TSC, Taiwan Semiconductor Company, I think that's what it is. Yes. If you didn't know this, like the overwhelming majority of all of the computer chips manufactured on the planet are manufactured in Taiwan. So, anyway, let's just, okay. So, server side. This is the server side class. So this is the last one. After this, we're done. That's it. No more server side. So long as you pass. So for the final exam, everyone will be writing in the same room at the same time. We got one of them big lecture theaters down in EA Wing. We can fit all sections in there, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to be one great big happy family for the holidays. So, for the final exam, you are permitted one double-sided cheat sheet in the same manner as previously. Right? You guys all remember that from the midterm? Yeah. Same rules apply. You are also permitted your standard scientific calculator. You won't need it, but I know some people have them as like comfort objects, so I don't want to exclude your comfort object during the exam, right? But don't bring in your blanket, like your baby blanket, because you might have written solutions on it. Horrible use of your baby blanket, but so it goes. Also, if you're going to bring a personal support animal, don't write answers on your personal support animal. It's the same as writing on your arm. It's also bad and wrong. You have a cheat sheet. Please put the writing on the cheat sheet. So, basically the agenda for today, I thought we might take a look at some of the example problems which I have posted. If you're a guest in this section from other sections, if your prof hasn't posted these, tell them to get on it. It's been pointed out to me that the solutions here don't actually contain solutions. I have to pull the crank again. I'll do it sometime tomorrow, I guess. Of all of these, I believe the best one is mock final exam .docx. I can tell you a little bit about the history of this problem set. I believe this problem set was the result of a miscommunication. A fellow by the name of Jonathan Graham, who occasionally teaches this class, who's a full-timer, thought I was going to ask him for some exam questions for the exam, so he wrote a bunch of them, but then I just kind of wrote all of the exam questions anyways. And so he was like, well, they can be review questions. And it's like, yeah, that's good. So these are like, I would consider them to need a little bit of like zhuzhing up to be included in an actual exam, but like in concept, these are good studying. These are good questions. So, question 1A. Write a small script which does the following. If no PHP session has been created, create a session and display the phrase session created on the screen. If a PHP session has been created, display an HTML form with a button that says log out. When the log out button is clicked, take all appropriate actions to break the session. Then display the phrase log out. Do you guys want to like try it, or do you want to like work through it on the board? What's a better use of your time? Anybody who wants some time to try it right now? Anybody who would like to just work through it collectively on the board? All right, that seems to be the overwhelming majority. Yes?
Can we define breaking the session?
Yeah, I certainly can define breaking the session. So it's a colloquial phrase. What it generally means is end the session. Now, the problem with this phraseology is that it believes things about certain session functions which aren't true, right? If you were to say to yourself, what function should I use to break the session? The one that would probably pop into your head is session destroy, right? Does anybody remember the problem with session destroy?
It deletes the file that the cookie's stored on.
It deletes the file that the cookie's stored on, but why is that a problem?
Is it because the session is still active? Like, because even though you've deleted on temporary server files, you haven't unset it, so you still have like this active session ID that could be like used maybe?
No, it will invalidate the session in the database. So if a client comes with that same session ID, it will register as having no corresponding session. So that is effectively breaking the session, and it kills the session ID that the client has. So the answer is, let's take a look at the gosh darn documentation. Session destroy. Very good. Can somebody read the contents of that box? Perhaps all of you can read the contents of that box.
You do not have to call session destroy from usual code.
Yes.
Clean up session super global array rather than destroying session data.
Yes. So the problem with session destroy is that the documentation itself tells you not to use it. Now, you may ask yourself, why? Somebody who's close to the door, could you close the door, please? Would you mind? Thank you. You might ask yourself why this isn't, like, deprecated, right? There's a further explanation down here. Immediate session deletion may cause unwanted results when there are recurrent. Okay. My opinion of this documentation decreases immediately because I notice we have verb quantity disagreement in conjugation. When there are concurrent requests, other connections may see sudden session data loss. So basically, in some cases, I guess you want multiple clients connected with the same session, and if you do it, it breaks concurrency, it breaks concurrent connections. So the documentation says don't use it. That's as a line, that's good enough, right? If you, for me, on a test, if I ask you about session destroy and you say, the documentation says don't use it, I will give you full marks for the question, right? We don't actually have to know the reason. But basically, the recommendation from PHP is to use a function called session unset. Can anybody tell me what session unset does? Shall we look that up in the documentation too? Oh, sorry, yes.
Because it resets all the session variables to nothing and also closes the session.
Yes. Well, yes, let's take a look. Session unset. There we go. Freeze all session variables currently registered. So it doesn't actually break the session, right? So after session unset, your session ID is still valid, right? If people connect to the session again, they can do so with the same ID. What's different is that all of the data inside of the session is destroyed.
So it might as well be a new session.
It might as well be a new session, right? It deletes all the data, it might as well be a new session, but you don't introduce the concurrency problem that you introduce by actually breaking the ID. And this documentation also says regenerating the ID is also a bad idea, which is problematic because that's a security thing. And at that point, I can only stand back, sort of dust my hands off and say, well, I guess people should use something other than PHP then, right? It was never meant to do what it's doing. But yeah, so session destroy is a big session unset. You know that meme of Drake, that's the one. The Drake meme, yes, no meme. That's what we want for session unset and session destroy. But anyway, returning to this problem. So, if all of you could load it up on your individual workstations, that would save me a little bit of hassle. That way I can just use the board. So, create a session and display it. So, if no session has been created, create one. This in and of itself is not difficult. How do we create a session?
Session start.
Session start. Good. Session start. The difficulty comes in saying the session has been created if and only if it's a new session. Right? So how do we go about that? How do we tell here if the session was newly created or not? This requires a little bit of thinking.
If a section variable, if a variable set in a global section variable.
This is something we can do, yes. So we can solve this problem algorithmically, right? The way that we solve this problem algorithmically is we say, if is set something like session at exists, well, I'm going to invert that. If not is set, session exists, then echo session created, and then set session at exists to true, or something like that. Right? We can do that. That will work. This is only one of a number of different ways of solving the problem, though. Right? So there's another method you can use. It doesn't tell you if the session is valid, but let's remind ourselves. How does the session work in the first place? What does the client send us when there is a session established?
Is it a cookie?
It is a cookie. Can we look up cookies?
Yes.
We can look up cookies. So, another way you could do this is set cookie at PHP, I think it's SES-ID, something like that, right? Whatever the cookie is that the client is sending to reestablish an existing connection, you can look for the existence of that cookie. That will tell you if the client is trying to reconnect. Now, it doesn't tell you if the session they're trying to reconnect to is valid, right? But it does give you, so I would consider this like, maybe like a 80%, this is like an 8 out of 10 solution, whereas like this is a 10 out of 10 solution, right? Another thing you can do, which is something you can't do during the test, is you can take a look quickly through the session superglobal, take a look through the session functions which are listed in the PHP documentation and see if one of these fits the bill. It seems like it probably. I have my eye on session status. There's a session status function which is used to return this current session status. Yes. It seems like 0 is like there is no session that has been started. 1 is there is no, 0 is sessions disabled, 1 is there is no session, 2 is there's an active session. This may not tell us if like they're attempting to reconnect, but there's like basically option 3 is comb through the documentation, see if you can find a function that fits the bill, right? Or have your favorite infernal chat bot comb the documentation for you. That happens to be one of the things it's good at. So far so good for that much. Next part of the question. If a PHP session has been created, display an HTML form with a button that says log out. When the button is clicked, take all appropriate actions to break the session. So, that is a somewhat more interesting thing, right? So, it should be obvious to us how to make that form button, right? I'll even, in the interest of time, let's skip that part. It's not the interesting part of the question. The interesting part of the question is how do I get this thing to kill itself, kill the session, if that button is clicked? Let's imagine we have, button. Right? So, the way I see it, there are two approaches. Most of it comes down to what the action parameter in the form element will be, right? Basically, what it actually comes down to is, do you have the, do you have the intestinal fortitude on a test to say, I'm writing a second PHP script for this, right? And if it was me grading it, I'd probably be fine with that, actually.
Am I severely overestimating this, or is it as simple as for the action, just have it call a function, and inside the function it calls is just session unset?
No, that would be the most straightforward answer to the solution, in my view.
Fair enough.
But not, I take your explanation and replace function with PHP script. So what I would do is I would have action target logout.php. Logout.php would be very, very simple. 2 lines, right? Session start, session onset. Remember that you have to start the session before you do anything to it. You have to connect to it before you modify it, right? But, I mean, for a PHP script at this level, that's called file level modularity, maybe, right? The alternative to that is much more complicated. If you write a form which is targeting this file, you have to give this file a name, right? What you do is you also do a kind of a quasi-MVC thing. You set a parameter to tell you what action you're requesting, and then you do the barest of bare bones switch controllers at the top. Am I reading this action? In that case, session start, session onset. If that action is not called for, execute default, which is this, right? It's about 3 times more work to do it that way, right? But both solutions are correct. It all depends on what direction you want to take things architecturally, right? Does that make sense? Any questions? Hopefully that was good review for sessions and cookies and stuff. Shall we move on? Yes, no, maybe so? Thumbs up? Okay, good. Oh, part B for that question is briefly explain any PHP functions you used. Sure. Question 2, provide the output of the following program. Okay, so this one's quite good review. Does everybody have it in front of them? Maybe I'll put it on the board anyways. The essential thrust of this question, you have a whole bunch of assignments in various styles, and you're just testing to see if one thing is equal to another. So let me ask you a question before we even get any further than this. Can you see this at the back? Back row, you want me to blow it up a little? Yeah, okay. Improvement? Good. So, very first thing to note. What's that? What kind of equals? Weak equality. Very good. So, we have A being 34, B being dogs. We have AB, AB, A dot B. Here's a question. What is the difference between C and D?
Quotation.
The quotation marks. Single quotes here, double quotes there. Who can remind us what the difference between single and double quotes is?
You can have variables and double quotes.
You can have variables in double quotes. I might expand on that definition just a little bit. You should think of single quoted strings in PHP and in Bash as being literal strings. Double quoted strings are strings with substitution. Right? So, the A and the B here, will those be substituted for their values? How many people think yes? How many people think no? No is correct. Whereas here, they will be substituted. So, is C equal to D under weak equality? Well, let's see what they are. So, C will have the value AB, including the dollar signs and everything. These variables will not be substituted. D, that's a double quoted string, so those variables will be substituted. So we have 34 dogs as the string. Now, how about E? What's the dot? It's not multiplication.
Concatenation.
Concatenation, yep. So what happens when you try to concatenate two strings together? You get a string containing both of those strings. Right? So, are these two things equal? No, not under weak equality, not under any form of equality. Are these two things equal? Yes. Are these two things equal? No. Right. So, my very strong advice. If you are confronted with a problem such as this, expand the expressions yourself as part of your solution to the problem. Don't just look at it and say, yeah, I think it's this, right? If I'm asking, if the question states, what is the output of this program? Unless you're very good at doing it in your head, do it on paper or beside it. Actually follow the calculations through. Okay? Thumbs up? Let's keep moving then. So, extend the code below, login.php, to do the following. When the user submits the form, your PHP file should look for a file called shadow. If shadow doesn't exist, it must be created. Your program must search the file to see if the username exists. If so, print the error, username exists. If the name does not exist, then the username and the MD5 hash, MD5, Jonathan's kind of showing his age a little bit.
Oh, I thought that would just be like the second argument in the password hash like function, and you would specify that, right?
Yeah, but that's not how it's written,
Oh, okay.
right? Like that's when you see the braces like this, it's normally like, no, that's a function. Use the function, which not how we do password, not hashing these days. How do we do password hashing these days? Password underscore hash, yep.
Password and then the password default.
Yes. Yeah, password default is fine for us for these purposes, right? And how do you verify a hashed password? Password verify. What's the first argument?
Hash. Oh no, password and the hash.
Yeah, the first argument is the password. The second argument is the hashed password you're comparing the first to, right? P.S. If you mess up the order of those two on the exam, that's not the sort of thing I deduct marks for, right? Because it's like, you know, reasonably speaking, if you were doing this type E, type B, you'd make the mistake, you'd fix it, you know. I will speak ever so briefly on the way that I grade coding questions, all right? If you're a visitor from another section, this is me, so I can't speak for your instructor. But this is what I do. Basically, your grade on a coding question is proportional to how much work it would be to get it to compile, right? So, like, if the amount of changes I would have to make is like, well, you swapped the order of these two operators, you missed a brace here, you have a semicolon there. That stuff is trivial to fix, so you're getting close to perfect or perfect on the question if that's all we're talking about, right? When you start talking in the like sort of B range for solutions, normally like you'll miss like one of the tests that was called for in the question. Like if you're misusing types but not badly, you know, you're probably in B range. But generally, like, the complete solution must be there, minus like maybe one or two things. If we're starting to talk about C's, we're talking like, you're missing more things and you're not like understanding like data type, like the data types or that sort of thing to a greater degree. Like D is where you start like not understanding like how to navigate a JSON and that sort of thing. Further than that, you've probably you've probably misunderstood the problem to a fairly great degree, right? And that's sort of your like 50% to 25% is like varying degrees of having misunderstood the problem. And I normally reserve like, you know, 25 and below for like, you've provided me a couple of lines out of the solution, or this is Python cut right, stuff like that, you know. I don't do that to people in Java when they give JavaScript instead of Java, because, you know, I know. But like if you're reaching all the way back to Python in third semester for PHP, you know. But yeah, like normally like that's the threshold under which it's like you really need to review your fundamentals, right? So, all right. So the question that we kind of have here, this is one of those questions that I think kind of would have required a fair amount of cleanup to be included in an exam. It does not really state here how the username and password is in the file, and that's essential to the algorithm, right? So there are two basic ways of doing it. If you're storing key value pairs in a file, how would you do it? An associative array is a data structure in PHP. It's not something you can put in a file. What do you put in the file? JSON structure. Yep, a JSON structure would do very well. You can literally just dump the data structure into a file and retrieve it. It's quite transparent and easy. For this example, you know, it would be a bit more work, but you could also do a CSV-based solution, right? If you had a CSV file where the first column was a username and the second column was a password, you could go through each line testing to see if the name and the password are the same, right? Make sense? But for this example, let's assume that we're going to be doing this with JSON. And just for the sake of simplicity, let's assume that the JSON exists and is complete, and we don't have to write code to initialize it. Fair enough? So, some of the information here needs to be gleaned from the HTML code you've been given in the question, right? If you take a look at the two inputs, input type text, name is username. There actually are two there that's just poorly entered. Okay, so we've got two post parameters, one username, one password. I'm going to kind of pseudocode this out for you, okay? I want to keep this brisk, I want to keep this moving. We got a lot to get through, right? So, filter post params username and password. I'm hoping that all of you can plug that in for me at this point in the course, right? Filter input, input post, yada 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 yada, right? Next, we open up the file, right? Now, if this is a JSON, which is just a simple associative array, how would you open the file?
File get contents.
Sorry, who, where, what?
File get contents.
File get contents, yes. So remember that there are two primary mechanisms for retrieving file contents. One is file get contents, file put contents. Two is fopen, fclose, fgetS, right? If the structure of the file is natively line by line, in many cases it makes sense to use fopen versus load the whole file at once. When it's JSON, you have to deal with the whole file at once. JSON has variable white space. White space includes new lines. So it is entirely possible to have a JSON, like two equivalent JSON structures. One, you have a key value entry on every line. The other, everything's glommed into the one line. There are no new lines at all. Both of these are equally valid and must be processed with no bias or prejudice, right? So you gotta load the whole file. You do not want to re-implement a JSON parser on the exam. Okay? So, we load the whole file. File get contents. I think the name of the file was shadow, which is kind of a weird name for a file. D for data. Next thing we do is we decode it. That's right. Remember, D is string data here. We can't, again, don't re-implement a JSON parser on the exam. Okay? So, JSON decode data. There is that parameter that tells you if you want to decode it as an object or an associative array. Not the sort of thing I grade for on the exam again, but if you want it as an associative array, you put true here. It only really affects the operator that you use to retrieve the data, right? Technically false here would be fewer characters, but whatever. So, data is now all of the user names, right? So now we're checking to see if the username exists in this data set. If we assume that the data is structured, where keys are usernames and values are passwords, how do we check an associative array to see if it contains a particular key? What's the name of that function? Nice and loud.
Is set.
Thank you. So, of course, once again, we want to like give an, I don't know if I'd even call it an error message. We want to give a message if the username isn't there, right? So, if not is set, data at username. Echo bad username. Right? Maybe even give it an exit 0 after that. Username check. Now, how do we check the password? Assuming these have been hashed using proper hashing methods. If password underscore verify, the password that we received up here, and then the hashed password, which will be d at username. I know that we did this like using databases primarily, but it is actually a good mental exercise to take something that we did with a database and pull it down to like a file, right? That's excellent practice for file I/O stuff. Even though in practice you would use a database for this type of thing, right? Make sense? Cool. And if password verify, then, you know, echo success. Else, echo failure. There we go. And what does it say when you have to add a new username password combination? This is another Smash Brothers joke. A new record! Right? Because it's a new record in the... Alright. I'm tired. I didn't get much sleep last night. The baby was keeping us up. Alright. It was a funny joke, okay? It was the execution that was bad. Alright. I think that's probably... Did we hit everything here? I think we hit everything here. Yeah. Alright, next.
There's a bit at the top where it says it should look for a file called shadow, and if it does not exist, it should be created.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this assumes that the file exists. There's a function file exists, which is, you know, returns a Boolean, which you can use. Yeah, basically, use that function, see if it exists. If it does, do this. If it doesn't, you can skip all of this, because obviously if it doesn't exist, it won't have a username and password. And then you just kind of like, you know, write an empty array into a JSON file, and there you go. That's it. All right. Is this helpful so far? Yeah. So, this code has a vulnerability. What? One question mark. Yes. As a matter of fact, this code has 2 big vulnerabilities. What's the first one?
No.
You're not filtering the
There's
Nope. Yeah, we're not taking. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, yeah.
That SQL statement is also doing an SQL injection. That username should not be there.
Yeah, I mean, if you look on line 3 here, we have username logged in to buy more. Now, is this in scope?
No.
No. What did the author of this mean? Name, right? So this is actually not even in scope. So technically speaking, it's not an XSS attack because it's not in scope. But, you know.
Is it even an XSS attack if the file doesn't work in the first place?
That's right, yeah. The file that's most immune to attack is the one that doesn't run, right? So let's assume that this didn't contain that obvious syntax error. Oh, this is a Word document. I can just. That's what they meant, right? So, I mean, here's another question. Is that in scope?
No. You just write global deviation.
But this isn't a function. And this is the line where the DVH is declared without username and password. I think this was a little bit of vibe coding going on right here.
Your professor's biocode.
I mean, okay. I will admit to vibe coding the syntax error questions. This is like, you know when like those questions where it's like find all the syntax errors? I'm like, hey chat, generate me some code.
Well, if you make mistakes, that's the problem right there.
Yeah, I mean, I do tell the chat to insert some syntax errors, but interestingly, like when I ask it to do that, like for example in JavaScript, it'll insert things like missing semicolons. And let me ask you a question. Are semicolons not required in JavaScript?
No, they're not.
Right? So vibe coding indeed. All right. I don't even know that, like, is quote even a function?
It is.
Is it? What's it do?
Let me see. It's for anything you want to turn into a normal string. I have it in front of me.
Okay. We're gonna get rid of that though. There we go. So here, don't let the fact that it's not capitalized throw you off. This is still an SQL query. Some of you have astutely pointed out that this is a SQL injection attack point. That's right. So, here's a question. Part B. Provide a URL which would exploit this vulnerability. What type of parameter is this? A post parameter. Are post parameters encoded in the URL? So, provide a URL which would exploit this vulnerability. Literally any of them, right? Because that's not how the attack is delivered. Okay, this is requiring quite a lot of work to be in a test. Sorry, question?
There's a question on the test, right?
Mm.
And there was like a question of like provide a URL that would exploit this vulnerability, we just put any URL, would that work?
I mean, if you explain why there was a problem here, because this is a post param, like the attack is coming over a post parameter, so yeah. Let's assume that this was a get parameter, right? I have occasionally asked questions like in this vein. It's like, if this, like, give me the attack. If you understand how the attack works, you should be able to give me the attack, right? And basically, like, the attack in this case would be something like, you know, www.blah.blah / question mark username is equal to script alert thingy script, right? You just put like put a little JavaScript in the URL for me, and that proves to me that you know that an XSS attack occurs when you put JavaScript in the URL and then execute it. Right? So far so good? And if this was like provide an SQL injection attack that would make this work, then it's a little trickier, like, but in general, like, basically you just like put some SQL code in here that like chains another command or, tricks the login check, something like that. Question?
Well, like, since it's just directly echoing the results of the query, would that also be like specifically a stored XSS attack that it's vulnerable to? That it's intended to be vulnerable to?
So let's see here. It's only a stored attack if the database, like the results, yeah, okay.
Like,
So
if
you
it's a
do-
SQL vulnerability, if it's a SQL vulnerability, they can insert a XSS attack and then not filter you out, but then it's going to execute it.
Congratulations, you found the third attack. Yes. So notice that deals, which is like the deal which is being for eached from the results, which is, I don't think that works either, because results should be just a Boolean, right? Results is a true or false value. You would have to say for each, oh gosh, this is so bad. For each DBH gets fetch all, PDO : fetch associative or something like that, right? And even then, like, you're printing whole database records, which is probably not wise, but yes, if there is any JavaScript stored in any string that's returned by this query, it is also being directly echoed to the screen and therefore will result in a stored XSS attack. So we have a reflected XSS attack, we have an SQL injection attack, and we have a stored XSS attack, all in one nice little piece of garbage that wouldn't have compiled anyways. Rewrite the vulnerable lines using at least 2 countermeasures against this attack. I mean, I would, but there'd be nothing left.
All of the codes and then
Yeah,
it exists.
Just take the piece of paper, scrunch it up, throw it over your shoulder, and start again. That's what this is. There's no saving it.
That would quiz.
Yeah, like,
The exam is not grading us, we're grading the exam.
Yeah.
I apologize. I assure you, okay. you want to know what like my process for writing like coding questions for exams often is? I write the program first, and then I write the question. So pretty much like if it doesn't exist as like, first of all, I don't know how you determine like how much it's supposed to be worth if you don't actually have the program, right? But also like when you read a question from me, you are reading a question on a program that exists that is a secret, and you have to guess the secret program from the way I've described it. That's how I test people on programming, right? And I think that's better than testing people on programs that don't exist, right? But, bleh. Anyway, yes. Let's leave that fever dream aside. Okay. MVC. Is that a topic in this course?
No.
Some people wouldn't know so. So, what does MVC stand for?
Model view controller?
Yes. Model view controller. I was gonna say something like funny and sarcastic, but my brain can't think that fast today. Describe the components of an MVC application and what.
It is.
That's the wrong correction. Their function are, I think. Whoa. What? No.
I mean, the original grammar was correct, it just needed the apostrophe removed.
Describe each component of an MVC application and what their functions are. Describe the components of an MVC application. I think that's better, right?
I mean, it would have worked the original way, you just needed to remove the apostrophe and then it would have been correct.
Yes, but like in the original way, you only get to the idea that there are multiple components through your knowledge, pre-existing knowledge of MVC architecture. Here, the plurality of the subject is directly in the sentence, so
I guess
you know there are multiple components.
It is possible, I guess, to get one student who's never seen MVC before and they just think, oh, there's just one component.
One student, oh, only one student who's never seen MVC.
Oh.
Try a whole section.
Oh.
So, describe the component, okay, so let's start at the top. What does the controller do? What are its primary things that it does? Somebody from my section. I'm kidding, don't worry. Yes? What does the controller do?
It manages the interactions between the model and the view, which highly implies that there are two additional components right there.
Very true. So the controller controls the flow of data between the model and the view. Another very important thing, it is the point of entry for packets, right? When a packet arrives at the server, it is sent to the controller, right? So a very, very important element of MVC architecture is that you have one point of entry and one point of exit, right? Centralized control. This is different from how PHP normally thinks about itself under file level modularization. File level modularization is a decentralized architecture, right? We just call whatever function is appropriate. We call whatever file is appropriate to the function we want, right? MVC is more strict, single point of entry, single point of exit, right? How about the model? What's the model do? You haven't said much to me. Yes. Yes. You with the scarf. Yeah.
Okay, connected to the database.
Connecting to the database. What else?
Functions calling.
Function. There are functions to be called in the model. Yes. Not just the database. What else?
Also, like running calculations.
Doing actual calculations. Also, not just the database.
It creates a session variables and whatnot.
Talks to the session and one more.
File system?
The file system. Yes. So, in this course we studied 3 primary permanent data storage areas. The session is like less permanent, but you know, it's still on the hard disk, right? So, sessions, the file system, and the databases. The model's responsibility is to talk to each one of those things. If the controller is talking to the database, you're doing it wrong. If the view is writing things into the session, you're doing it wrong. Now, I will address a question that a few people have had about assignment 4. It would be very, very convenient, sir, if I were able to read from the session in the controller. Can I do that, please, please, please? And I say yes. Just don't write to it. All right? You can read the status of the session superglobal in your controller, but just don't write anything to it in the controller. If you're writing to the session, that should be done in the model. Okay? Sound good? Like, otherwise you're just kind of like calling a model function to like copy something into the template array and then using the template array. It's like, why go through that extra circuitous path when you can just read the thing, right? Well, the answer is like the session might not exist, but you know, for us, the session always exists because we just always have the session turned on, but maybe in some cases the session isn't turned on, but that's too complicated for this course. So, how about the view? What's the view?
So the view reads the template array and populates whatever variables are necessary. And then the control will then send that view to the client.
Yes. So what is the what form of programming code is the view primarily composed of? HTML, right? When you're working in a framework like Laravel, Laravel is the PHP framework, by the way. You will use what are called templating languages. Templating languages are just slightly more compact ways of inserting variables into a document and then returning the document, which is the thing that PHP was designed to do in the first place, right? So, yes, the view is the client-side code, right? The HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. When we send that stuff out to the client, we populate some values derived from the model, derived from the template array. But ultimately, that's what we're sending, right? We're sending the client-side code. Does that make sense? The controller's responsibility is to decide what client-side code needs to be sent in this situation, right? Am I showing you the dungeon start screen, or am I showing you the dungeon view screen type thing, right? Make sense? Oh, I didn't ask you guys how assignment 4 is going. How's assignment 4 going? All done? How many people are done? How many people are working on it? How many people haven't started? Oh, that's okay. Just the general experience report that I've had from students in general, it's like, it's not as bad as it looks. Would you agree with that? It's not as bad as it looks?
It was very intimidating to get started. Once I got into it, it was like, yeah, this is fine.
Okay. Hopefully you guys had a little fun. Did anybody actually modify the dungeon?
No time.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. If you did like leave me anything in the dungeon itself, please just like leave a note on your submission, because I'm gonna be marking quickly, and if I'm not told, I'll probably miss it, and I don't want to miss it. Yes.
I did have to modify both of the dungeon and the entrance.
Oh yeah?
View entrance, the assignment by meetup PHP doesn't get loaded properly because it just has the question mark with PHP.
Yeah, there's an
Like,
issue
okay.
with equaling, yeah, it's missing the equals.
What's missing the equals?
So you've got the opening PHP, like you've got
Oh.
PHP block, you forgot the PHP in the PHP block.
Oh!
Like it doesn't show a syntax error, and it doesn't like fail out. It just shows nothing. And on View Dungeon, technically works fine, but border radius on the background is missing a semicolon, so it doesn't actually apply that. So I just
I would appreciate any bug reports submitted to my email, and I'll see if I can fix those up for next semester. I mean, given the haste with which it was done, I'll take it mostly works.
Yes, so I have an issue where I have it working, but like so the characters will pop up, but in the background of the dungeon would be completely different from what Maria's example is like.
Oh.
Huh. So figuring it out. Probably not.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a couple of hints, right? For me, selection of the background image was its own model function, right? Because that's business logic, right? In that case, like, you're not talking to, like, there are a couple of functions in there that are actually business logic functions and not like I'm talking to the database or the files or the session, right? That's one of them. Another one is deciding like how turning changes your orientation, right? That's also like logic, not in the controller. But yeah.
Yeah, because I was comparing my numbers to like different like how it interacts.
Yep.
Okay, so it takes the same steps to get to this portion, but then it just shows up a different display in the background.
Yeah. So I'll let you in on a secret. Alright? The version of that assignment I had in my head was one where I said, okay, here's the working example, and have fun. And like it was missing a lot of the description in the assignment document, because like basically everything I put in the assignment document is going to be taken and thrown into the bloody chat algorithm, right? And like I think that there's something to be said for testing your ability to reverse engineering an existing problem, but I chickened out, so. And I gave you a full description of the algorithm, so. Like there's only so many complaints I can deal with in one semester, you know? List one advantage of MVC architecture. You have to learn it from the exam, for the exam. No. What is MVC good for?
Maintainability.
Maintainability, yes. Extensibility, all of the isms, all of the lovely isms that we have, yes.
Views and models can be swapped out.
Yes, views and models can be swapped out. Similar, like, pull on your Java, the thing they taught you in Java, right? The model can remain constant, but the views can change. Did you have something yet?
It separates front-end development from back-end development, so you can have different sets of developers working on it.
Yes, very strongly separating front-end from back-end development, which is, you know, one of those lines along which work teams are often divided. Not to mention, it's faster and easier and has fewer bugs. Good. Okay. So question 9, question 5, question 9, last one. Assume a database exists, created by the following SQL snippet. Not that I'm quibbling. Does that SQL statement create a database?
sure doesn't.
What does it create?
Table.
Creates a table. Do we now know the difference between a table and a database
Yes.
Good. Then my work was not completely in vain. So we have, and this looks strongly like MySQL rather than the stuff you do in the databases course. That's okay. My guests, student number, first name, last name, email. Okie dokie. Write a REST application, perhaps, which accepts the following URLs. There you go. So you're given a few things, get, post, and put. You're given a description, right? Not really enough to go on, but there you have it. Certainly it would be possible to write a controller for this. So, so let's do it. Okay. Because I'm in a good mood, would you like me to give you a hint?
Yes.
Databases. Study databases. There's my hint. I won't tell you any more than that. But make sure you put some points into studying databases. So we have a bunch of routes. We have a few different request methods. We are building a switch controller, right? Switch controller needs a couple of things right off the bat. Whatever you do, you'll have to include the model, right? No matter what, you'll need that. So basically, you have the choice of whether you're going to attack the route first or the request method first. What do you guys think we should do? Request method? How many people say request method? How many people say the other one? Request method has it. So, fortunately, that's pretty simple. I'm going to leave some space up here. Switch on server at request method. Case get case post case put that gets you a pretty good distance right there. Now, let's consider our get operations here. How many do we have? We have 2. So the routes that we're looking at are my app / student with a number and my app / student / or with no further parameters, right? So we need to know how to extract these strings and check them, right? We do explode, yes. So can anybody remind us where we are storing things? So we know we're exploding on / / but what are we exploding on /
Server at request URI.
Server at request URI, yes. Server at request URI. Now, the explode function will take something like this and translate it into empty string at the top, my app student. Possibly with an additional parameter if this thing is here, right? So, if params at 1 is equal to my app and params at 2 is equal to student, then we have a valid request. It's important to make sure that the route matches, even if you're not deriving any data from it. Now, we're basically looking to see if this number exists here or not. How might we do that?
Find the end of the array. So we could do like end within the exploded array.
Mm-hmm.
We return the last value and we check if that's none.
Yep, we could find the last element in the array and check to see if that's this or not. Another way that we could do that, yes?
Filter var and validate int.
Yep, that's true. This is trying to, so this is a student number, so it should validate as an integer. If it doesn't, it's definitely not what we're looking for. Although I'm not sure that that's a perfect solution. It may include cases that we don't want, right? It can be as simple as how many arguments will how many elements will this array have? How many elements will this array have? That plus that last one validating as a number would tell us completely we were given a number here, right? So, inside of this if statement, you'll have another one. If count, why would we have length? That doesn't make any sense. We're PHP, we get our own names for things. If count is equal to 4, there we go, then basically you call whatever model function is required by that box right? F1, filter your input, F1, otherwise F2, right? I'm not going to drill down here to the point of like writing the SQL queries, though that's good practice for doing database stuff, which you should study. Okay? Does that make sense? The other ones work similarly. You'll notice that post is actually the same route as this one. So one thing that you could have done, if you were focusing on the route first, we actually have only 3 distinct routes, so one of these you would select between get and post. But honestly, I kind of prefer switching on method at the top level. It's a little cleaner and nicer to understand, and it like categorizes first as opposed to drilling into parameters first. And like, I don't know, it feels more clean to me to categorize request methods first, but you know, it works either way. A lot of like modern systems won't even like, basically you specify the route and the method at the same time like it is in the table. So like you would have like a .get and then the route, and then you'd have like a function that runs like the stuff, right? That's pretty close to Node, isn't it? Like it's like, what's this part again?
Well, actually, you don't want the brackets. You want it to be a reference to the function. So.
Yeah, but like there's something that goes in the front here.
Well,
What?
we don't call it. We just call it app.
Yeah.
We do service.
Yeah, true, yeah, it's called app. And that's like, you know, that's a constant that's defined up above, but anyway, that's kind of like the way that more modern systems do this looks a lot more like the table itself, which is not an accident, right? But because we're working in stinky, stupid PHP, we're going to have to mess around with a bunch of low-level if statements, switch cases to do this, and if statements, and blah. You get regular expression support here. It's so nice. It's so nice, regular expressions, guys. Yeah. All right. But yeah, I don't know. The rest of this is kind of wash, rinse, and repeat from there. Couple of other important elements of an MVC architect, or a couple of other important elements of a REST API. HTTP status codes, right? You should return one that's appropriate for the situation. For MVC, you have to restrict access to the controller using htaccess in an Apache server, right? But I guess that's not, well, that's also true for REST APIs. Any questions? He asks in a voice that makes it sound like he really doesn't want any questions. No, I'll say that nicer. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah?
Did our assignment require HTTP error response code?
No.
I threw a couple in as a treat.
Aw, thanks, you guys. Oh man. You know, some of you know that like the best Christmas presents I will get are like people who actually put some effort into their assignments, you know? Because, you know, I'm to the point where like I'm an adult now and I don't really get Christmas presents because I have kids and they get Christmas presents, you know? It's just, yeah, my Christmas presents are people doing well, so do well. Any other questions? Anything anybody wants me to review about the course while we still have some time? because we ran through all of the questions in that thing. No? Feeling confident? Good. Lack of confidence might be motivation to study.
Actually, I do have a question.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you've noticed a pattern, but do people do generally the same on the final as their midterm, or better or worse?
So I will put a great big fat disclaimer on this because I'm about to talk about statistics. There are lies, damned lies, and statistics. All right. So basically, when I talk about the performance of students in aggregate, it says actually nothing about the performance of any particular student. There's always, like, are there individual students who pull their grades up from the midterm to the final? Consistently, yes. There are at least a few in every class. This is most noticeable for me when it's like one of those classes that has a dual grade scheme, because when they pull up their mark in the exam, it's like I have a little column in the spreadsheet that I usually do, which tells me how much they got pulled up by by the better exam result. And like sometimes on those like the Java 70% thing, people sometimes pull themselves up by a good 15%. And it's like, yeah, you studied. And perhaps you didn't study on the last one. Good job. But in aggregate, people will normally score 5-ish, 5 to 10% lower on the exam than the midterm. In aggregate, that's usually the case. So if you were kind of like in a borderline situation on the midterm, pull up those socks. Show me what you can really do. All right? Study, study, study. I've given you everything I can. I've given you all of the material I have. I personally am not a big believer in cramming for tests. I don't think it works nearly as effectively as people think it does. It's certainly not a good long-term strategy. The thing I always, always, always tell my students, the best preparation for the exam is the course, right? If you have been dutifully paying attention, doing your work yourself this whole time, reading through the material outside of class, asking questions when you have questions, emailing me when you don't understand something, you will do fine, right? More than likely, right? It's people who think that like you can become an expert in PHP in the how many days do we have now? Like we've got 6 days till the exam. 6 days is not enough time to become an expert in PHP, no matter how hard you work at it, right? Keep in mind, you guys know how many like in-class hours you have for a course like this over a semester? 56. You have 56 hours with me in a room in a semester for a course. Unless you can replicate 56 hours of studying of the same quality with me not in the room, well, maybe you can, but maybe I'm just a detriment. But unless you're willing to put in the 56 hours, right, between now and the exam, assuming you've been skipping every class, which of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, right? You guys are the guys who come to class, right? But, that plus, like, not doing your assignments, right? Like, they say that, like, basically on average, you should be spending an hour out of class for every hour in class on a class, right? Which I know a lot of people don't do. I know a lot of people have like jobs and families and stuff, and you know, maybe you live inside of a giant termite mound and that you spend most of your time squashing termites, you know. Life is difficult. I acknowledge that. But, you know, you're also like trying to get a diploma for the purpose of bettering your lives, right? If you want presumably all of you are here because you want to access a higher tier of employment than you could have accessed without this diploma, right? It's not actually the diploma that dictates your ability to do that. It is your own skill. And I'm not even talking about your ability to interview, right? Interviewing is important. Interviewing is a skill, by the way. If you want to get good at interviewing, what you should do is have interviews, right? I know it's like one of those catch-22 things, right? But you can get hired because people can become very good at interviewing. I read a thing once that in terms of sorting out good employees from bad, the entire interview process is only 56% effective, right? It's only slightly better than flipping a coin, right? So you got the job, right? What dictates your ability to stay in the job? Whether or not you can handle the work. Yes?
What if you write really bad code only you can maintain?
If you write really bad code that only you can maintain, nobody will want to work with you and the senior devs will band against you. And basically, you probably end up in like a constructive dismissal kind of a situation. Or jobs have, what are they called? Probation periods, right? People can often hold it together for as long as the probation period, but often, they fall apart at some point. Basically, and this is information Steve Adams brings us back. The point at which people kind of start dropping out of their jobs because they can't handle it anymore is the point at which Google stops solving all the problems. And we'll say chat, the point at which chat is no longer able to do your job for you, right? At that point, if you had anything that, you wouldn't have been doing that up to this point in the first place because you'd be taking your job seriously and trying to learn it rather than trying to figure out a way to get a chatbot to do your job for you. Here's a spoiler alert, guys. If a chatbot can do your job, you are redundant, right? So you should try to be able to do the job that you're being assigned, right? But when people are if you all you can do is regurgitate internet, as soon as you start having to solve novel problems, and let me tell you something, guys, that comes much swifter than you think, right? The whole point of you is that you can solve novel problems, right? If you can't solve novel problems, you can't hold down a job in this industry, right? Because this is intellectual work, right? This is difficult, abstract, theoretical work. This is not digging ditches. No offense to ditch diggers, but this is we have machines that do that now, right? We don't need mechanical people, right? We need people with brains and creativity and love and passion for the art form that is programming to go out there into the world, solve problems that have never been solved before, and make money for bosses, right? That's where you need to go, right? And, you know, when you go out into the world, you're not going to have school assignments, right? Like, these long form write-ups that I've done about how to do the programming problem that I've assigned to you. Get used to not having anything like that, right? You're just going to be asked to do stuff, right? Very often you will be given very little in terms of instruction, right? And you'll just have to kind of figure things out. This is why it's like, if the world of work is like anything, it's like the personal projects that some of you are working on, right? It's more like that, but more directed, right? Basically, it's like that, but you've got, you know, a guy standing over you with a rolled up newspaper that keeps hitting you in the back of the head whenever you do anything that's unproductive. It's like, we don't need that in it. It's like, you know, I understand it would be very good to solve the general problem, but we need to ship product, right? There's a guy standing behind you, hitting you in the back of the head saying, we need to ship product. That's what business is like, right? And, you know, the degree to which you internalize the business gremlin is the degree to which you'll perhaps even enjoy working in that type of space. Because it's actually kind of unpleasant to continuously get hit back in the back of the head with a rolled up piece of newspaper. So, yeah. But yeah, the hope with a course like this, I know that PHP isn't really the language anybody wants, right? But you could make the argument that it's the programming language you need, right? Because your ability to pick up PHP is also your ability to pick up other languages, right? That is what we are interested in training, as well as the particulars of the language that we've covered, right? It's like, you know, okay, because I've sat on one or two committees where we've had industry professionals come in and tell us, like, what needs, like, give us feedback on the program, right? And I'm like, you know, at the last one I was like, well, I think this tool is one we should be covering and this tool is one we should be covering. Would you guys agree with that? And like a lot of the manager types were like, we don't really care what tool you cover. What we're interested in is communication skills and soft skills, right? And it's like, you know, I understand that like part of the role of the college is to teach the current thing, right? We have to keep current with industry trends. But like they're not really all that fussed, at least the people we were talking to. They're not all that fussed that you guys took PHP, right? What they're more interested in, can you work on a team? Can you communicate your ideas? Do you piss people off? Right? Those are the types of things they care about. Right? And if you can manage that, you're doing okay. Right? PHP, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully what you learned was how to read documentation, because that's important. Right? And you know, hopefully you learned something about how servers work. That's also important. But you know, you should be able to take these skills and take them to anything. Yeah.
I was going to say the last few classes for software quality and testing have been telling us about internet security.
Mm-hmm.
And when the professor was explaining all this stuff to us, I was thinking, more already covered that and in more depth as well.
Yeah, I mean,
that's in this class. So.
I mean, this class properly construed is like a good solid, like, by no means does this make you a cybersecurity expert. Really all we've covered here is like the bare bones of, you know, how to prevent obvious forms of attack, right? But like, what's more important is like the general principle of cybersecurity, which is like, don't provide attack surface, right? When something goes wrong, you need to be able to respond quickly and effectively, right? And there are things you can do to help, right? The worst thing you can do in like cybersecurity is kind of like hands off, like, whoa, guys, did something just happen? You know, like. But at the same time, like, cybersecurity expert is like a well-paid it's like a well-paid consultant type role. Cybersecurity experts, right? Man, if you wanna see cybersecurity, if you ever have the opportunity to take a class with Jonathan Graham, that guy is like he's one of the baddies turned goodie kind of territory.
Jonathan Graham?
Jonathan Graham, yeah, like that guy. This is what happened. Okay, I have to tell you about this, all right? We had a new cybersecurity lab put in EA Wing, and Jonathan was the guy who came up to the boss and said, "Yeah, it took me 12 seconds to break into it." So, yeah, if you want someone who knows their friggin' stuff on cybersecurity, that's the guy. I think he teaches a lot in the cybersecurity program rather than here. Occasionally you'll see him pop up though. But yeah, oh goodness me, I probably ran over time, didn't I? Only by 1 minute. Okay, those of you who are coming to databases, we shall break the class here. Those of you who are guests, you're welcome to come to databases, but you know, there's usually a little less room in that class, but I think we can still have room. It runs till 5:30 though, so if you don't want to stay, then don't. I'll be uploading the video.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Off.